Subcompact defense 9mm versus 40 Smith & Wesson. What we have today is some Sellier and Bellot ammunition. Our 9mm is a 124 grain jacketed hollow point. Our 40 Smith & Wesson is a 180 grain jacketed hollow point. It's a huge difference in the hollow point cavity size with those. That 40 Smith & Wesson is a really big hollow cavity. 9mm is kind of average there. And I'm going to use my Taurus G2C pistols in 9mm and 40 Smith & Wesson, both with 3.2 inch barrels to test these. Now, I had the card with the rated velocity out here with me. I somehow misplaced it. But the rated velocity wasn't super high, and I believe that the rated velocity was through a 4-inch barrel for our 40 and through a 6-inch barrel with our 9mm, which is kind of interesting. But the 9mm, I do remember it was rated at 1201 through a 6-inch barrel, and the 40 Smith & Wesson, I can't recall what that was rated at, but I tested both of these in my 5-inch MMP 9 and 5-inch MMP 40, and what I got was below rated velocity with both of those, but very, very low recoil. And with both of those rounds, they actually performed pretty well in the 5-inch pistols. So that got me thinking, if we go down to a shorter barrel, will they still continue to perform pretty well? Because I was actually surprised at the low velocity that we had, that we were still performing well. This 9mm through the 5-inch barrel was something like 1100 feet per second on average. Our 40 Smith & Wesson was something like, I want to say it was 928 feet per second that I actually got, which is pretty low, and it still performs. So I'm thinking if they performed at those velocities, maybe we won't lose that much velocity by dropping down almost 2 inches a barrel. Maybe they'll still perform. So we're going to test these. We're going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy we get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my 10% clear ballistic test. We're going to go into plain clear ballistics to see what the best potential of those cartridges are. And what I mean by that is not jumping right to using denim or anything that might clog a hollow point, because I want to see these things expand if they can and see what they look like. Then after that, I'm going to do more of our real world simulation. 4 layers of sweatshirt material on this first 3-inch piece that represents our pectoral muscle. After that, a 1/4-inch medium density fiberboard after 3 inches to represent hitting ribs or sternum. That'll be more of our real world simulation. So we'll do a plain clear ballistic shot, then a real world simulation shot, and then I will shoot at the steel target. I think I'm going to go up real close with this to 12 yards and see what kind of practical shootability I can get with these. So let's get started with this test. All right, so our 9mm is rated at 1201 feet per second through a 6-inch barrel. I looked up the 40 Smith & Wesson. It's rated at 974 feet per second through a 4-inch barrel. So let's see how close we get to 1201 feet per second in this little G2C here with our 9mm. $1,057, $1,061, $1,056, $1,058, $1,048. So not very fast, but that is a very consistent velocity. So that's one thing I like to see, because if we do a ballistic test on it and their velocities are all the same, it means it's probably going to perform across the board in the real world a little bit better. So 40 Smith & Wesson, we are rated at 974 through a 4-inch barrel. This barrel's a little bit shorter. See how close we get to 974. I got 928, I believe, in the 5-inch barrel. So let's see what we get in our 3.2. Trigger on this G2C kind of stacked and stopped for some reason. Keep going here. Hold my shot. 914. 884. 911. 919, 872. So not quite as consistent, but not a whole lot slower than what it was in the 5-inch barrel and that barrel length that performed. Another thing that stands out with this is it doesn't really recoil any more than like a 9mm plus P, which is pretty good for a 40 Smith & Wesson. So let's hit our ballistics gel block and see how these compare. All right, first up, we'll do our best potential shots, just shots in the plain clear ballistics. This will give us our best potential to get expansion. So let's see what we get here with our 9mm in plain clear ballistics. Let me shoot that one more time. That kind of dropped kind of weird. One more shot here. All right, 40 Smith & Wesson. Let's go take a look. All right, kind of surprising results here. Our first shot did not penetrate very far. Our second shot did, and the reason why I took a second shot is because the way this clear ballistics melts, it kind of gives a little bit of a concave bottom. And right here at about 16 inches, it went underneath that, hit the shelf that's made out of wood, and stopped. So I think that it stopped based on hitting that shelf, not, you know, its true potential. And looking at the second shot, that makes a little bit more sense. We had energy dump in the first 3 inches. We actually had a little bit more even with the second shot. So our two 9mm on the bottom, 40 on top. So considering it looks like we had an energy dump and expansion, you know, that's going to be a good penetration number to look at and say that it's probably correct. So I see a bunch of expansion. Our penetration with our 9mm is at about 21¼ inches. Our 40 Smith & Wesson, we had a lot of bullet rollback. Usually that happens when we have massive expansion, but I don't really see a whole lot of massive expansion. So probably the hole that it made stayed open a little bit longer than typical, and it just rolled back in it. But that penetration with the 40 Smith & Wesson is actually right there at 17 inches, and the bullet rolled back to about 12. But you know, where it rolled back to really doesn't matter. 17 inches is our penetration. So you know, a little 4 inches more with our 9mm, a little bit of over penetration. With that being said, 21 inches in clear gel isn't really that much penetration. It's unlikely that would pass through an average attacker. So let's put on our fabric material, put in our medium density fiberboard, see how they continue to compare in more of our real world simulation. All right, our real world simulation, 4 layers of sweatshirt material, 3 inches of clear ballistics, a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard. Let's see what we get with our 9mm. All right. Set that with our 40 Smith & Wesson. Let's go take a look. All right, interesting results. Normally I don't show the fabric, but that big hollow cavity on that 40 on top really blew a big hole through that, as where with our 9mm it just punched through, and that's really kind of to be expected. If this is more of a pointed tip 9mm, it's gonna punch through, as where the 40 was like a cookie cutter. But what we got going on here is very interesting. No expansion with both of these. So we'll put our medium density fiberboard. And what we're seeing here, this is actually good because we're not really seeing evidence of tumbling right away. I don't like to see tumbling right away because that usually leads to very inconsistent penetration numbers. Now, if the bullet does eventually tumble, which I think these may have done, that's fine, but I don't like to see it, you know, before 3 inches of penetration. So seeing that they went in straight, that's pretty good. Our 9mm went just a little bit further than what it did in plain gel with no expansion, and we are at about 21¾ inches of penetration. So again, a little bit too much penetration. Now with our 40 Smith & Wesson, we can definitely see that that tumble a little bit. Neither of these had much energy dump in that first 3 inches because neither of these expanded. So our 40 Smith & Wesson went to about 8 inches. Looks like at that point it started to tumble a little bit, straighten back out. Total penetration track, which you might not be able to actually see, but it's probably about 1 inch past the actual bullet position. We're at about 18 inches, 18¼ inches of penetration. That bullet rolled back just a little bit there. So this is kind of what I expected. When I tested these in the 5-inch barrels, I got good performance in both our plain shot and our medium density fiberboard shot. And I just tested the 9mm recently, and I said in that, I think if I'd lowered the velocity a little bit, it might not perform. So I can't tell you if this is a good round based on getting good performance and expansion in the MDF with the 5-inch barrel. And I was correct to say that because when we put the denim and the MDF in there, we had no expansion whatsoever. Now with our 40 in the past test, that still expanded and it didn't over penetrate. And we had a lot better expansion, but it looked to me like we were kind of on the threshold of it barely expanding. So it makes sense again why it didn't expand through more of our real world simulation test here. All that being said, If you were to use full metal jacket in 9mm, you would get a penetration probably up here, 28, 29 inches. If you were to use flat point full metal jacket, which is the standard in 40, it would have went through both these blocks. It probably would have went through a third block. So that tells you a hollow point that doesn't expand is still doing better than a full metal jacket, because that hollow cavity, it kind of just slows it down. And it seems to do more damage. And that's good, because if you're putting more energy into a shallower penetration number, that bullet's going to do damage, whether it's tumbling or whether it's the hollow cavity that's not expanding and still pushing pressure out, whatever it might be. It's better than a full metal jacket that's just going to pass through. And why I'm mentioning that is because this ammo was roughly at the same price as higher end full metal jacket ammo. So you're not going to get full metal jacket that's the cheapest you can go for wherever these costs. I think they were in the mid, about $21, $24, something like that. You're not going to get the cheapest full metal jacket. It's not going to be that expensive, but some of the higher end stuff, American Eagle, whatever, UMC, it kind of gets in that range. So my point here is, for the cost of these, they're a better option if all you can get is one ammo to practice with and use for defense. This would be a lot better than getting just full metal jacket and carrying that, is my point here. So not terrible performance overall, but you could definitely do a lot better. So let's pull these out of the block. We'll take a close-up look at them, then I'll shoot our steel, see what kind of practical shootability I can get with these. Here's a close-up look at these bullets, our 9mm and our 40 Smith & Wesson going through plain gel. This does not look nearly as good as what this looked like, this brand, and this from the same box looked like from the 5-inch pistol. I actually expanded out really big, and here it's really mediocre expansion, looks kind of odd. And our 40 Smith & Wesson, this looks a little bit closer to what it looked like in the 5-inch pistol. Not great expansion, but it's better than no expansion. When we go through our medium density fiberboard, things will change up a little bit here. Our 9mm, our 40 Smith & Wesson actually change up quite a bit, as going from a lot of expansion to no expansion. 9mm here, no expansion, a little bit of nose deformation. That could have caused it to tumble, and it just coincidentally straightened back out. Same thing with our 40, but less deformation to that bullet nose. But that hollow cavity being big, I think that really slows it down a lot better than a smaller hollow cavity. That's just been my results I've seen through the years of testing. It seems like a larger hollow cavity is usually a little bit better, but sometimes it gives a little bit of issues with feeding through semi-automatic pistols. But overall here, not great performance, but I would say our 40 Smith & Wesson did a little bit better. And it wasn't that much harder to shoot. So out of both of these, I would say our 40 is a little bit better here than our 9mm, because you can get a lot better choices in 9mm. With 40 Smith & Wesson, even some of the better brands sometimes act a little weird when you shoot them through subcompact pistols. So I'd say for 40, for the price of this, it's not terrible if all you have to choose from is 40 caliber. With 9mm, you could do a lot better than this. So that's a close-up look at those bullets. All right, 25 yards from the target, I'm going to do something a little different than what I normally do. Normally, I get proper sight alignment on that first shot and then just pop them off as fast as I think I can hit the target. A lot of times not even getting any sight picture at all, just to see how they shoot. Or I back up really far and get really slow sight alignment and see how accurate I can be. With these, I'm going to get proper sight alignment, but I'm going to go a little bit faster than typical from distance and just see how fast I can hit the target with these, see if there's a big difference here. So 9mm, let's see how I can do with this. All right. That's kind of fun, but really surprised about how many times I missed. It's not easy to do that quickly from 25 yards. 40 Smith & Wesson. See how I can do with this. Wow, that's bad. I don't know what's going on with that. Obviously, you guys know that I shoot better than that. But this is the first time I did something like that, where I'm trying really hard to get that sight alignment really fast and popping them off. Not very good doing that, obviously. So I didn't really see a big difference in that test, and it's kind of a useless test at this point. I'm looking back on it, but yeah, not great. So this could just be the pistols are not that easy to shoot as well, because they are a little bit more difficult than others. But anyways, looking at this test, What I can say is the performance isn't the worst I've ever seen, but it's not the greatest I've ever seen. It's right in the middle, mediocre performance. You know, a little bit better than a full metal jacket, but a lot worse than really high-end hollow points. But you know, the price was a little bit better than a full metal jacket. So would I recommend this for carry? Probably not, because if you're wanting to protect yourself, you know, you're wanting an ammo to stop a threat as fast as possible, and especially with 9mm. People get on me sometimes for knocking 9mm, but I do it for a reason. It's because I care, and because I've watched a ton of videos with law enforcement using 9mm, and the common theme is it takes a lot of shots to stop a threat with 9mm. So if you're going to be carrying 9mm, you should really be using the best possible ammunition. Now, with 40 Smith & Wesson, I think there's a little more leeway on that. I think you can use ammo that's not quite as good and be a little bit better protected than 9mm, in my opinion, just from some of the stuff I've seen. But both of these are kind of mediocre performing. They're okay, not great. So if you want to carry this stuff, hey, it's better than nothing. I wouldn't carry it, but interesting test. So that's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.